Ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting before we start our webinar because those of you who work are probably emerging from traffic in many ways, shapes, and forms. My name is Leslie Jones Thomas, and I'm the Vice Chair for the National Bar Association Criminal Law and Juvenile Justice Section. First, I would like to introduce our chair, our esteemed chair, LaShala Wilson. Ms. Wilson received her economics degree from San Diego State University in 1985 and her Juris Doctorate from UC Davis, King Hall in 1989. Ms. Wilson was a deputy public defender with the law offices of San Diego Public Defender for 24 years. She's tried over 120 jury trials to conclusion, ranging from misdemeanors, serious and violent felonies, 3 strikes cases, sex offenses, and homicides. She's completed several hundred preliminary examinations and argued numerous motions. She's now in private practice with the treasured members of the profession. Ms. Wilson was honored as the 2016 Woman of the Year by the 79th Assembly District, the Honorable Dr. Shirley Weber on March 20th, 2016 during their assembly session. She has been a president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, San Diego branch from 2009 to 2014. She's also received that branch's President's Award in 2003, as well as the NAACP California State Conference Dr. Claude Hudson Award in October 2010 and 2014. Ms. Wilson has received the Women Inc. Southeast San Diego with Women of Distinction Award, as well as the San Diego University State Lincoln Cluster with an Extraordinary Community Service Award. We know her well as our chair, but welcome, LaShala.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I do hope, as well as this program and the one that we did before on the prosecutors, because now this is the defense side, that people will join our section so that we can do more work.
Our next forum panelist joins us from Chicago, Illinois, and she also practices in Indiana. Jamise Perkins. She has over 15 years of experience as a criminal defense attorney. She attended the Whitney M. Young Magnet High School, played basketball at the University of Illinois. Exactly. She has a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and received her Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Illinois. After obtaining her law degree, she sat and passed bar exams in Indiana and Illinois and currently holds active licenses in both in the field of criminal defense. She works diligently with nonprofit organizations besides toiling as a warrior lawyer, using her skills to help high-risk adults who were wards of the state in Illinois. In 2005, she was hired as a deputy prosecuting attorney for the Lake County Prosecutor's Office, where she gained valuable experience prosecuting some of the most complex, challenging, and high-profile felony cases, and achieved a 98% conviction rate. She was twice recognized as the Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year within her office. From 2012 until the present, she has been in private practice with her primary focus on criminal defense work. She's been very successful in obtaining pretrial release, acquittals, and dismissals for numerous clients, including clients charged with even the highest crimes of murder. She's grounded in her faith, and she is a warrior in the trenches, elevating the criminal defense bar. Welcome, Denise Perkins.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate it. Pleasure to be here.
I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce Brendan Woods. I don't know too much about Brendan Woods, so I actually Googled him and I was bowled over. He is currently the public defender for Alameda County. He matriculated at Stanford University. He has so many accomplishments. I'm not even going to list them all because the first part of our series, you all will be discussing with us your journey to get to the current position. And I don't want to amplify things in my words and read when we can actually hear from all of you individually as to how you were inspired to pursue the path that you're currently on. So I'm going to wait for Brendan because I'm just totally amazed at your accomplishments. And I'm very glad that Terry Wiley was able to secure your attendance because I know you're very busy.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We also have on our panel, Anthony Rico. Mr. Rico has the distinction of not only being one of the top criminal defense attorneys in our field in New York State, but also nationally. He also happens to be one of my mentors and colleagues. I had the distinct pleasure of making his acquaintance when I was a BLSA member at Georgetown University Law School. And I was desperate to obtain a very high profile speaker and warrior in the field of criminal law. So I called up Judge Bruce Wright in New York, and I told him that the Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, and Maryland law students, we needed him to come down and talk to us. And I was told by some of the BLSA chairs that, well, there's no way you'll get him. You'll have to get past his staff. We think he has this Spanish guy named Rico, and he's going to be blocking your ability to talk to the judge. So I called up and Mr. Rico, who was his clerk, answered the phone. And I said, I really need to talk to Judge Bruce Wright. And he said, well, he's not available right now. And I said, well, could you tell him there's a Jamaican woman on the phone who needs to speak to him? And somehow I got through, and Judge Bruce Wright came down to Philadelphia to their museum and totally blew all of us away with his discussions about criminal justice reform and the need for bail reform. And that was in 1982. And I had the pleasure, once I became an attorney, to meet Mr. Rico and to actually try cases against him when I was a prosecutor. And, you know, he's a phenomenal attorney, and I'm going to let him tell you about his journey also. Finally, we have Mr. Joey Jackson, a very good friend and colleague, one of the top criminal defense attorneys in New York City. He's a former Manhattan prosecutor under Robert Morgenthau. He's also a distinguished legal analyst for CNN and Headline News. He received his bachelor's from SUNY Brockport, his master's in public administration from SUNY Albany's Nelson Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy, and later his Juris Doctorate from Morris A. Dean School of Law at Hofstra University. As a law student, he served as the editor for the Hofstra Labor and Employment Law Journal and held internships with the New York State Education Department for New York Congressman Charlie Rangel in Washington, D.C. While pursuing his master's degree, Mr. Jackson served as a legislative analyst for the New York State Assembly Speaker. Joey Jackson is also a former adjunct professor at Monroe College and has launched a very successful law firm within New York City and added some stellar people to his team recently. Welcome, Mr. Jackson.
It's great to be here. It's good to see you, of course, and it's good to be among such genius legal minds. So I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so we're gonna start off with the first question. We're gonna start off with Jamise, and basically, this is the second part of our forum series. Our first part was the prosecutor's series, and we had the distinct pleasure of having some phenomenal women from across the country. Darcel Clark, Marilyn Mosby, Letitia James. Our California colleagues were, elevating our discussions throughout. Jamise, we want you to tell not only your colleagues, but some of the people who aspire to be criminal defense attorneys, what inspired you to enter this profession and eventually become a criminal defense attorney?
Thank you, Leslie. Excellent question. I started out my career as a social worker in Chicago, and I worked with young adults who had been deemed as wards of the state in an independent living program. And I had my first encounter with the justice system when one of my clients, a young woman by the name of Rose, was murdered by an ex-boyfriend. And that was my first personal look at the justice system. And that young man, he was the only witness to what occurred, and he got off. And that led me to law school. I wanted to do something. I wanted to effectuate change. I wanted to be a voice. So I went to law school, got out, went to the prosecutor's office, where I truly enjoyed the work that I was doing. My first trial was my first jury trial was a traffic ticket. A pro se litigant appealed and earned his right to a jury trial for a traffic ticket. I'm sure I treated that case like it was O.J. Simpson, because it was a pro se litigant. It's a jury trial. I had themes. I had all types of props and everything. So, and it really just sparked my love for the law. And I probably would have stayed in the prosecutor's office, but two things. One was the money, but the second thing was an encounter with the police. As an attorney, I thought that my education and my employment was an equalizer for my race, and I was wrong. One day I got a call from a colleague, another attorney, a Black woman. She had gotten stopped by the police on her way to work, and they told her her license was suspended. She asked me to pick her up. I said, sure. So I go to the scene. It's a pretty upper middle class neighborhood. 7:30 in the morning, I go over, identify myself to the officer, and I say, listen, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take her car so you guys won't tow it. And he says, well, Attorney Perkins, I don't know if you can do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Here's my license, I said, don't worry about it, young man. I'll call. Let me call patrol and find out who the, patrol supervisor is today. I can, I'm going to take care of this. And so I do that. And next thing I know, not only a second car, third car, fourth car, fifth car arrives for two Black women in business suits who are attorneys at 7:30 in the morning. The officer tells me we're towing the car. I said, you know what? I hope you guys don't get subpoenaed anytime soon. At that point, he jumps out of the car, demands my identification. threatens to arrest me for refusal to identify myself. Well, I thought I was smart. I know the law. I'm like, I'm on recording identifying myself. I look at one officer, I'm like, officer, unnamed person, you just testified for me in a murder trial last week. What are you guys talking about? They immediately handcuffed me, took my briefcase, threw me in the back of a squad car, emptied the contents of my purse on the trunk of the car. And literally, my friend was calling my supervisor, white woman, who came to the scene. I was released to her custody. They wrote in their police report, they released me to her. They then proceeded to notify the newspapers and try to bring felony charges against me for intimidation. Now, fast forward, the charges were rejected, but the impact on my life was permanent. And I knew then that if something like that could happen to me, an educated prosecutor in the world today, what chance do my other brothers and sisters have? I felt I was compelled to be a voice for the defense. So that led me to a defense practice that I started from the ground up and to public defender work. But that's been a large part of my journey.
Lachala, can you tell us what brought you to this space?
Okay, actually, when I decided to go to law school, my sister was already in medical school, and I decided to do medical school when I found out they were fishing cadavers out of vats, and I didn't want to be dealing with dead people. So I decided to go to law school because I figured until the ERA passed, I was probably never going to get married until women had the same rights. And I've been waiting since the 70s, so that's fine. But when I went to law school, I actually thought, there's two areas I will not work in, criminal law and family law. But it was in my third year when I did trial practice, and I was actually a prosecutor on a murder case. And I really liked that. I mean, I had exhibits and everything. And then the next one they had was civil, and they were fighting over 500,000. Like, I don't want to fight over money. I want to fight over freedom. And then I went out for the mock trial team at UC Davis, and my partner and I won all of California. And then we got to compete nationally. And they said, if you want to do trials, you either have to be a deputy district attorney or deputy public defender. And so when I interviewed with those two offices in the Bay Area at UC Hastings, the DA said, we will hire you after you pass the bar. Public defender said, we will take you now right out of law school. And so I started working. I was the first Black female attorney in that office. Before, they had like a private panel, and then they had the public defender office. I think it started in 87 or 88. So I was the first Black female law grad, then attorney in the office. So I wasn't indoctrinated from one side or the other. But there's nothing prouder than standing up there, going against the government and making sure they can prove their case. And if they can't, it's not my problem. So I didn't have a problem with that. But I liked what I was doing. And I could have went to both sides. The DA's office tried to lure me away a couple of times. I probably should have applied to be a judge. I probably should have been a commissioner. And my life has been, trial by error. But I did the best I could. But I never thought I would do criminal law. But even now, I still like doing defense. And the difference is when you're a defense attorney, even though prosecutors say they have control, depending on where you are in the structure, they're always like, oh, I got to go upstairs and get permission. Oh, I got to see if this offer's okay. But when you're a defense attorney, the only boss you have is your client. I never have to consult anyone else. It's what my client wants. So they may have some power, but you get dragged to trial sometimes because prosecutor says no offers or your client won't plead. But I like the power of just my client and I taking control of the case instead of having to move up the chain. And that's how I did, criminal defense.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, could you tell us what led you down the path of criminal defense?
I would love to. So again, a pleasant good evening to all. Love being on the panel with all of you, admire so many of you, and thanks all who are joining. So it's a brief story. My father, I grew up in the Bronx, born and raised, beautiful borough, great people, and it was an interesting childhood. My father was a police officer. My dad got into an issue in the police department and actually stood trial. The essence of it, without getting into all the facts, is they were conducting an investigation. He was asked to turn state's evidence. He refused to turn state's evidence regarding his partner and other things that were occurring. And they basically said to him, listen, you know, either you're with us or you're not, right? If you're not, you're going to be really sorry. And so he was. And he stood trial in Bronx County on a variety of felonies. My dad, may he rest in peace, he's no longer with us, but gives me a lot of inspiration, very positive man, very uplifting man. And he always boosted me and always uplifted me. In any event, not to go far afield from that, I'll continue the story. He was the type of dad who was, you know, he'd come to my baseball games and I'd strike out 4 times and he'd say, and I'd be like, Dad, I was terrible. And he'd be like, son, but you swung the bat so well, just hold it a little more, stick with it, you're going to be great. He'd come to a game, I would pitch, I would walk the bases loaded, and again, and 1-run scores and 2-run. So I say, Dad, my pitching was terrible. He said, but you threw the ball so well, you just got a little focus. So he was always uplifting. And I could remember in becoming an attorney, and I'll pivot back in a minute to my Bronx tale and the tale of him. But when I became an attorney, I'd come and I'd have conversations with my father and I'd say, Dad, I was awful in court today. He said, are you kidding me? He said, clients are so fortunate and lucky to have you advocating for them. So he was always so uplifting of me. But in any event, he was an officer who had a problem. And so he stood trial on multiple felonies and he ultimately was convicted of a misdemeanor and he served time for that misdemeanor. And basically the people who came back and said, hey, you know, we told you you're going to be sorry. He said, listen, you know, he was sorry, but he actually said that his lawyer saved his life. And he said that I have to tell you, he told me, you know, my lawyer saved my life. And he said that you know, if you chose a career like that, would have an opportunity to save someone else's life. And so initially he was lobbying me to be a state trooper and everything else. And, you know, that wasn't my thing. Really. And, you know, I never really applied myself in school, so law wasn't quite my thing, but I realized something very interesting about myself, and I'll keep it very brief. A lot of panelists I want to hear from, but I realized that there's a cause and effect, right? Whenever I wasn't that great of a student, you know, I tell people, you know, who think I'm this established attorney who's done all this stuff and, you know, had everything easy. The struggle's been real for me. I mean, you know, I took the bar once, thank God, but I took the law school admissions test several times, and it's been a struggle, and I've kept battling. But I realized about myself that if I applied myself, I would succeed. If I didn't, I'd fail. It was that easy, because there are people who don't study and they do great. That's not me. I don't study, I fail. I study, I do pretty well. And so in any event, based on the story of my dad, who subsequently went to work for the fire department after being convicted of the misdemeanor, one of the things in my failures in life that I really drew really a lot of strength from was the fact that after all he went through, when he was released, he didn't, you know, hit the bottle or, you know, become a, you know, whatever. He came back to work with his family. My mother's a nurse, and he came and he took whatever job he could to support us. I have a brother and a sister. And so, you know, based on his path and based on what occurred to him and based on the papers I reviewed and based on the injustices that I saw and based on the, you know, the slight talent I had for this, because I wasn't really that good at anything else, hated biology, sciences, was never good at, you know, but I could read and write and, you know, generally speak. And so I decided to do it. And I felt that in doing it and getting into the profession, you know, you really, even as a prosecutor, which is where I started, you have the ability to impact so many people's lives in a positive way. And as a prosecutor, you could use your discretion for evil, or you can use it for good. You could sift through the cases and decide when an officer is in your office that they're not really telling the truth. The search is bad. You're not pursuing the case. It's resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. How are they disorderly? Or you could use it to jam people up, elevating cases to felonies, prosecuting misdemeanors that should be violations. And I learned that even on the prosecutorial side, right, I take a lot of pride in being a defense attorney now, but even then, I thought that I was a prosecutor who understood the community, having been a child of the community, having grown up in the community, having been searched as a kid by the police in my community, having hung out around the projects and dealt with all the things that I saw, that on the prosecutorial side, you could do some good too. And when I switched to the defense side, I realized you could do even more good. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm glad to be part of this profession. I'm glad to know, so many of you. Leslie, a titan in the community, Anthony Rico, a titan in the community. Not that all of the rest of you are not, but these are people that I know who are just outstanding attorneys. And so to do what I have seen them do, it's just a real honor and a joy for me. And I hope to do more of it with respect to fighting for justice and doing good things moving forward. And thank you for the time.
Brendan?
So good evening. Thank you for having me. So I guess my journey, a little different. So what got me here, what got me to public defense, in some ways similar, is what I saw growing up, what happened to my family, and how I was impacted. It's great to have a bunch of New Yorkers here. So honestly, I'm the first person from my family born in the States. My family's from Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica, Queens, so big ups. So happy to be here. But growing up, we were really, really low income. Pretty impoverished background. My biological father was never involved. I think I last saw him when I was 8. His path was more beating women, selling drugs. What really got me here was the way I was treated by the police and the way I saw this criminal and justice system treat my family. That's what got me here to public defense. So real quickly, being the firstborn out of the family, firstborn out of the cousins, a lot of pressure on you to be successful. So I think I did pretty well. The black male cousins behind me, not as well. One cousin, when he was in New York, was beaten pretty badly by the police. When he was a freshman in college, suffered traumatic brain injury. His life went a different path, ended up on federal parole and so forth. Another cousin after him in age, when he was a sophomore in college, living in LA, began some mental health issues, began to self-medicate with marijuana, moved on to meth and crack, began to commit crimes, did not graduate college, of course. About 6 months after I became public defender, they found his body in San Francisco under the pier. He'd been there for about 30 days, was barely recognizable. My uncle, who helped raise me, when I was a sophomore in college, got sentenced to 27 years in prison for armed bank robbery. So I've seen up and close and personal how the system has impacted my family, how the system preys upon communities of color, how the system works to cage Black and brown people. So I figured if I was going to get through high school, get through college, get through law school, I was going to do a job where I could fight against a system that cages our people. So that's why I became a public defender. That's all I really ever wanted to do. So I went to law school, went to University of San Francisco, not Stanford, graduated in 1996. I've been with the Alameda County Public Defender's Office ever since. In 2012, I was appointed as the Chief Public Defender of Alameda County. You may or may not know, our office here was formed in 1927, one of the oldest public defender offices in the nation. One of the oldest. There were 8 public defenders before me. I was the 9th. I was the first Black person to be appointed to this position. And when you think about that, I always say, like in person, like, yo, awesome, Mr. Woods, that's great. That's kind of BS, okay? I'm in Oakland. This is Berkeley, the Bay Area, home of the Black Panthers. And it wasn't until 2012 that a Black person held this position. Thinking about the population we serve is absolutely shameful. Currently, right now, in the entire state of California, I'm the only Black chief public defender out of 58 counties. So I'm happy to be here. The work we've done in my office over the last 8 years since I've been in charge has been pretty dramatic. We've changed the way criminal defense is done here in Alameda County. I like the fact that you're Googling me because you'll see a lot of crap out there. But we're doing great work. I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to share more about that later. So thank you. And one thing I noticed I appreciate that there are people of color in the prosecutor profession, but for me personally, it's something I could never do. It's never been part of my desire. I think it's important that people on that side who are compassionate, but I will say that I do not believe in prisons. I'm on the abolition side. I think we as a society, as long as prisons exist, they uphold the structure of white supremacy, and we have to be attacking that because they're built historically to cage Black and brown people. That's what they do. So I will turn it over to the next panelist.
Well, big up to Jamaica. I'm a Jamaican. I understand how you're feeling. Just want to say I became a prosecutor because I knew I was going to be a defense attorney, and I knew I was going to do major cases. And I wanted to be a player so that when I come up against someone as a defense attorney, I know what they have to prove. So maybe my 6th or 7th year into the office, I had a trial, special narcotics, citywide prosecutor, and I came up against 3 of the most superlative Black male attorneys that I had ever come up against. Anthony Rico, Harold Ramsey, and Edward Wilford, uptown lawyers who had a superlative federal and state criminal defense practice. I didn't sleep for a week. It was just an undercover buy and bust. It wasn't a big deal. I did not sleep for a week. Then we had a Black judge, Judge Jackson, in Manhattan Supreme Court. We had Black court officers. The court reporters were Black, and these 3 Black men were facing off against 1 female prosecutor. It was the best experience that I ever had, you know, just being in that space, because I'm sure Joey will tell you in Manhattan, you'll be lucky if you see anyone of color. And even if they're in a suit, handcuffs could be put on them at any moment, because if you don't have your ID, it's a problem. I thought I was the stuff. And after my trial, I was successful in getting my little minor conviction. And I would go over and talk to my criminal defense friends, because at the time, my best friend was Letitia James, who was with Legal Aid. And I spoke to Anthony Rico after that trial. And he said, you know, you'd be an excellent criminal defense attorney. And I said, I'm not ready. I'm doing all these major cases. I have all this power. And he said, well, let me show you the check that I just got for this hearing that I did in federal court. And we didn't even start going through the discovery. I'm with Jamise. I need to support my family. I said, let me become a criminal defense attorney. Let me introduce you to Anthony Rico and let him tell you about his journey to become a defense attorney. You're muted.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I am outside Mount Sinai Hospital. My full-time job is driving my wife of 34 years to work and back. The law thing is just my side hustle. The pay is not good, but the benefits are off the hook. So I'm here. I apologize for that because you can barely see me, and I don't want anyone to think that participating in this event with these outstanding lawyers is something that I take one step down. Small profession. I know of every lawyer on this panel. I haven't met Brendan. I met. He may not remember, but I've met him once. But I know of every lawyer on this panel. And why is that so? Because we're a very small profession. It's a huge profession. But the number of African American lawyers who practice in this profession, who are good at what they do, your reputation resonates across the country. And so while you may not have met a person directly, you have interacted with people like Michael Ogle in California, who have worked with me on death penalty cases. And I've had the opportunity to talk about the lack of attorneys of color, et cetera, in the capital community. And so folks' names come up. So let me That's a different story. You come back to that. So why am I doing what I do today? Has nothing to do with a check, because the people paid for my education in college and law school, and the people paid for my ability to be in this profession. That bill was paid by our ancestors,
Mhm.
and they paid a heavy price for it.
Mhm.
So in May, it's going to be the 40th year since I graduated from law school. And I can't believe it. I can't believe how the time has gone by. I'm as humble and grateful for the sacrifices that people made to give an opportunity to a boy like myself who spent his childhood throwing rocks on 8th Avenue at tour buses to have an opportunity to go to law school. All of us have had great tragedy in our life. I lost a sister to a heroin overdose at the age of 15, and I was a small boy. I didn't understand the world. I didn't understand the destruction. I think that my motivation for being in this profession was deep within myself. If I had a choice to make, would it have been to stay up all night working on a writ for somebody on death row, or working on a brief, or foregoing, so many different things in life to prepare for a trial? No. I would have had a fat cat job somewhere with my feet up on a desk, uh, doing something other than the extreme hard work and commitment that's required to be effective as a defense lawyer. Um, I think that I am where I am today as a result of what Dr. King called the law of unintended consequences. Because I didn't start off in life saying I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to law school young. I went to college young. I came out of law school. I had a great opportunity to clerk with Bruce Wright, who is perhaps one of the most brilliant people I've met, most courageous. He was known to the newspapers in New York as Bruce Churnham Loose Wright. And what an experience it was for me as a young black man, young black person from Harlem, to have an opportunity to be around such a brilliant and courageous African American. Um, I didn't pick the criminal defense world. It picked me. Um, Today, my practice is probably 90% capital work. I'm a part of the Death Penalty Resource Project. I'm one of the Resource Council. Not only do I work on my own capital cases, but I'm involved in the supervision of capital cases in every state from every person that's viewing on this program today. And my role as Resource Council is to make sure that these teams have strong advocates. Unfortunately, there are very few of us. I know Joey on this call. I have a smile on my face because I'm like, so extremely proud of him. Leslie, I've known directly through practicing law in New York. And I'm very proud of them. Um, my great, uh, like everyone has a sense of reward for what they do in life. And I've often thought about my own. I'm not one of these African American people who's a criminal defense lawyer so they could become a judge. I could have done that. I didn't want to do that. I'm not doing this for fame or fortune. Because if you're seeking fame and fortune in this society, put a mic in your hand, take your clothes off, shake yourself, shoot a basketball. There's plenty of fame and fortune for that.
Mhm.
There's no fame and fortune in committing yourself to excellence and going into these courtrooms and dismantling this system. My great reward for being in this profession is when I look at Joey Jackson and I look at Leslie and I look at the lawyers that are coming, maybe a step behind me. I don't know how much farther they are behind me. And it's such a rewarding feeling that, you know, I hear about a person like Miss Wilson, who I've heard about for years. There ain't a whole lot of sisters in Southern California. It's not. And listen, get over it. It's a fact. Brandon, I've heard about. And it is really such a rewarding experience to see, you know, and to hear about the reputation that we have for excellence in this profession. We make a difference in these courtrooms. We make a difference in the lives of everyone we represent. You know, Jamise was talking about that misdemeanor case and how she prepared for that misdemeanor case. When you see that, you know you're around a good lawyer. Because no case, people always say to me, oh, Tony, you know, what's the biggest case, you know, what's the important case you ever worked on? And they run off all of these names and so-called high profile cases. And it's like, no, not really. You know, the cases that really meant that much to me was representing a 16-year-old kid who was charged with a big gun. And I made the difference between them getting a felony or a non-felony and being able to go to college and helping them get into school. Those cases have meant more to me than what, you know, other people think about what it is we should do. So in short, so we can get to the questions, I grew up on 8th Avenue. My family was poor people. My family was devastated by drugs, death, decades of drug abuse, brother to the penitentiary, the whole thing. Somewhere along the line, I was blessed with the opportunity to walk a different path. And I accepted that. And I took it seriously. And I still to this day. People who know my work know I'm committed. I'm there. Every aspect of criminal, from trial work, appellate work, post-conviction work, argue cases in many of the circuit courts in our country, appellate work, and even once going up to the Supreme Court. It was important to me that we demonstrate to ourselves that we have the capability of going from the bottom all the way up to the top, that we can get it done. So I'm going to end there and look forward to answering questions that people have. I would end by telling you this. You know, when I was a kid, I had a scholarship to go to college. It was a Malcolm X scholarship. I had a job uptown. There was a brother named Eddie Stafford X. He was an old school Muslim, became a Muslim in a penitentiary. And I said to him, yo, Eddie, I got a scholarship to go to college. I hope I do good in college. And Eddie said to me, he said, Rico, you don't box with the devil here on 8th Avenue and you won. You're going to be fine. The only thing that's going to stop you is yourself. And that brother gave me a piece of advice some 40 plus years ago that still resonates in my heart today. And it's part of the reasons why I agreed to be a part of this panel. And I hope that this becomes fruitful for the people who are listening in.
Much.
Well, you know, various jurisdictions around this country claim to be protective of individual rights, whether it be on the federal level or on the state level, constitutional protections, etc. If that's the case, then why did it take New York State, one of the toughest states in terms of safeguarding rights, over 25 years to reform bail and to reform discovery? Let's start with you, Joey.
Well, let me say this, Leslie. If you analyze it in the sense of New York's supposed to be progressive, New York's supposed to be a world leader, New York's supposed to be pretty liberal, and it takes New York that amount of time, compare that to other jurisdictions that are conservative, and that should give you a sense of how intense it is, right? With respect to a system that has historically and customarily been very problematic as it relates to our people and in meting out justice and fairness and everything else. So I'm pleased that obviously New York got there, not so pleased in the time frame that it took to get there, but I'll take the victory. Having said that, if you look at the system in and of itself, right, there's so many components. When I have discussions with young people about the law, about criminal justice, about a number of things, I remind them that it's a village. And what am I speaking about? When you're an officer out on the street, you have a great deal of discretion with respect to what you're going to do. Am I going to make this arrest? Am I not going to make the arrest? Am I going to make a recommendation to the prosecutor of what charge should be what or where should be where? Am I going to exaggerate or heighten issues that I know don't exist, or am I not? Once it gets out of an officer's hand, right, it's in the prosecutor's hand. So a prosecutor, again, a vast amount of discretion with regard to how am I going to approach this case? Am I going to elevate the charges? Am I going to dismiss the charges because there's a suppression issue that I could decide on my own? I don't need a judge to tell me things were bad. And a good prosecutor will make that decision unilaterally and say, hey, there's nothing to see here. And then you get to the defense side, right, where you want to talk about discovery, right? The fact is that we as defense lawyers rely upon discovery greatly to do our job and to do it effectively. The tools, right, that we have as lawyers are the arguments we're going to make. What are good facts? What are bad facts? What's a good document that we can use to impeach? What's a bad document that we have to tell the jury about, but we can minimize or explain, right? Are we going to do our jobs, and are we going to do it at a high level? And are we going to confront witnesses appropriately? Are we going to put on a case? And if so, are we going to have experts in the case? So we play a large role. And then, of course, we rely upon a judge to be fair, to admit evidence that should be admitted, to exclude evidence that should be excluded, to treat both sides fairly and not necessarily, speak to one side over the other side or favor one side over the other side. So don't want to go far afield, but in answering a question as to any progress in the system, we have to recognize what that system is, what that system provides for, and how that system could become better. So we have a long way to go, there's no question. But I am heartened by a number of things like what? I'm heartened by the fact that we have in our political, right, because it starts with politics, it starts with electing people who are sensitive enough to know that the law needs to be changed. It starts with choosing representatives who could be sensitive to communities and who could ultimately institute laws, procedures, and regulations that affect those communities in a positive way. And so I think that, especially now, we have an opportunity, right, with a political climate now, with the president now, with Congress as it is, to pass legislation. And we could argue it's a long time coming. We could argue it should have been done 20, 15, 30 years ago. Change going to come, but the time for change is now. And so everything we do and look to needs to be incremental. And if we look at, for example, the George Floyd bill, and that's timely because, hey, we're all going to be talking about they're doing jury selection now. And we're looking at other issues, Leslie, like a number of things, banning chokeholds, eliminating immunity for police officers, right? We're looking at a whole host, no-knock warrants and whether they work or they don't work and how we could reform that process, right? We're looking at issues when you say defunding police, loaded word, maybe we could redistribute income in different areas and maybe police shouldn't be responding to homelessness or other people who need assistance. So let me just summarize because we could go on forever because, look, whenever you talk about legislative change takes the people in positions of power to make those changes, to institute the different policies and programs that need to be instituted. But we could, I think, agree that it came way too late, but it's here. And I would just ask that other parts of the country follow that lead, the lead that came late, but the lead that came in following suit. And I would think at the federal level, based upon the nature of Congress now and what's going on, and the fact that the George Floyd bill passed the House, that maybe we could have a Senate that does it too. Because at the end of the day, just to button this up, I think that it takes all corners of our system to reform it. It takes all corners of our system to make it better. It takes all corners of our system to recognize there's a problem, to do something about the problem, and to ultimately have laws that are reforming enough so that our communities could be benefited by the system and not detrimented as they historically have been.
Jamesh, your thoughts on the move towards police reform in your jurisdictions. What do you believe a criminal defense attorney can do to make a lasting impact in those areas?
Well, one thing that I think is important, and it's having the discussions we're having now. Every single time you have a platform and you have an opportunity to bring to light, shed any light on things that are happening, then we have to maximize those opportunities. Last year, I remember a story coming out about a social worker in Chicago. They went in with a no-knock warrant to this lady's home, bust the door down. It was the wrong house. They have body cameras on. I think it was 13 minutes. They had that woman there naked, all men walking all around. She's yelling and screaming, "Why you have the wrong house? You're at the wrong place." Chicago police actually fought to block the release of the body cam video. So it's the defense attorneys who fight to say, no, we have to expose this behavior. Exposure is at least one step in the right direction toward accountability. And the other thing is we have to be willing to use the platforms that we have. So in my situation, hey, if I have an opportunity now before a judge to say, I'm willing to file those extra motions. I'm willing to, as Rico said, stay up late at night preparing that writ. And I'm going to, in my jurisdiction, I happen to be one of, we may be the only one where in criminal defense, we can actually take depositions of witnesses. We can depose the police officers. We can depose the alleged victims, the complaining witnesses, but it's a tool that's oftentimes underused. So one of the things I think is important is exposure, accountability, and then using every single resource that we've got available to us. And on that bail reform thing, I also wanted to to kind of to piggyback, because it's too often, my county, in Lake County, Indiana, they just recently started using an assessment tool to try to, instead of just taking a table where it says, this is your charge, this is the bail, this is your charge, this is the bail, taking a table and doing an assessment as to whether or not that individual is a flight risk or a danger to the community, giving a score and letting some of these individuals out of custody so that we don't have the Khalif stories, somebody that's in jail for over 1,000 days on a case that gets dismissed. So I'm not afraid. I tell people all the time, I go to trial, I file speedy trial motions when the evidence isn't there, my client doesn't have the funds. We have to be willing to get in there, use our voice to just hold officers and the prosecution and the state accountable.
Lachala, tell us what it's like to be in Southern California and to be the only one. You're muted.
Okay. I love being in Southern California. We did get rain. I remember Tony said it never rains in Southern California, but we needed the rain. Now with Mr. Joey Jackson, I have a point of contention with you. New York does not lead. California leads. Where we go, everyone else goes. And I'm sure Mr. Woods will address that. And as far as the bail reform, that was the weirdest thing when I first started right out of law school. They would set bail and the bail would be $50,000. And I'm like, Your Honor, he doesn't have the ability to pay. Okay, I'll put it down to $10,000. And I'm like, you can put it down to $1,000. They still can't afford it. And I never understood that. But back then in 1989, 1990, I didn't know how to fight the system because that's how I came in and that's how it was done. But because we have criminal justice reform, everything's changing. In California now, they have to do a motion about whether or not the defendant has the ability to pay, because I never understood why rich people got out. But if you didn't have the money, you stayed in. And you know what that meant? People that didn't look like me. And it just didn't make sense. And you'll find that if something doesn't make sense, I have a hard time processing that information. So I am glad that California has done stuff now. We got bills. We're very progressive, and we are the leader in the nation, Mr. Jackson. But what would bother me, like on domestic violence, that's a good example. I guess after the OJ case, well, before the OJ case, a couple gets an argument, they call the police. The police, normally it's the man, sorry, that's how it works. Oh, go walk it off, come back. But then after the OJ case, then if you get a call on domestic violence, someone's going to jail, normally the man. But what annoyed me is they would arrest the person on a bail, and that's $50,000 on a domestic violence. Because if you do a misdemeanor, it's a cite and release. And then what would happen is for him to get out, I have had some female DV defendants, you have to pay the $5,000. But then what happens when the DA or city attorney looks at the case, they go, oh, this should be a misdemeanor. So it gets knocked down to 10,000, but see, they've already paid their money and they're not able to get their money back. So I was talking to a bail bondsman and I said, there should be a law that if the charges aren't filed, they should get part of their money back, because normally it's 10% go through attorney, it's 8% of the bail amount. And he said by law, they're not able to ask for it. So that's something I need to look into and find someone to carry a bill so that if they don't file charges, you don't, that money, you don't get it back. I just hate, maybe because I'm an economics major, I hate waste, I hate fees. And the fact that then if the person they're paying the bail bondsman, they're trying to pay fines, it's just a mess. I don't know if I answered your question. And yet, well, the other problem is you got judges, maybe former DAs, sometimes former civil attorneys, and they're scared of the DA. And I'm like, the bail shouldn't be this amount. And I had someone who was a DV, 50,000. Then they filed as a misdemeanor, it's 10,000. And I asked the judge for OR release because now it's a misdemeanor. And the judge still kept it at 10,000. I'm like, Your Honor, if he had pled guilty, he would be out. So why are you punishing him for exercising his right to go before a jury of his peers? But anyway, he had to bail out. All right, that's it in my story, except for California rules. Don't mess with me. And that was Tupac. California knows our party. Okay. Sorry.
Leslie, I just wanted to jump in. LaTala just reminded me also, when we talk about that bail reform piece, the part that's so important, every last one of us has had clients who will plead guilty because they're broke. They want to get out of jail. They will plead guilty because they're broke. And it just starts the cycle, because once they get that first conviction, what's one of the first tools the state's going to look at to decide what sentence or what plea to offer them if they should ever get another charge? We're going to look at your criminal history. So I just wanted to jump in and add that piece also.
Brendan, in your practice, how have you implemented strategies to reform the laws, whether they have progressed or not?
Sure. So I'm sorry. I'm going to disagree slightly about California leading. I got to do it. I got to get in there. You think about California, we still have the death penalty, right? We still have 3 strikes, right? We didn't get bail reform done. I mean, so California, yeah, it's blue and all, but it ain't, there's some stuff we still got to do. And New York ain't that great either. New York, your speedy trial rules and the age for juvenile, you guys had some messed up. That was shockingly messed up when I learned about it, but you guys are making progress, and so are we. But when it comes to how we've gotten things done here around legislation, it's about mobilizing, organizing, and being strategic, right? So those are kind of the 3 steps. And I really believe that defenders, criminal defense attorneys, we have the stories of our clients that make impacts at the Capitol in Sacramento here. We are the mouthpieces of our clients. And you mentioned Khalif Browder earlier. His story reshaped the discussion around bail. It's tragic, but being able to use his story reshaped the entire discussion around bail throughout the nation. And we as defenders are the carriers of those stories. I think when I first started practicing, I said, I'm going to be the voice for the voiceless. I'm going to fight for the voiceless. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. That's bullshit. Our clients have voices. They have voices. We have to amplify them to make sure they're heard, because they've been silenced by system of oppression, by white supremacy, whatever it may be. They've been silenced. And we as defenders, these people with law degrees, have an obligation to make sure their voices are heard. And we see injustice happening every single day in courtrooms. We see them every day. So talking about successes that we've had here, as we've all seen, we're all trial lawyers, we all go to court, and we see just a lack of diversity, a lack of Black people in juries. That's one of the biggest issues we see. And so it's been kind of my mission, driving force, to get legislation passed here in California that changes that impacts that. So I'll talk about two bills we did real quickly. One bill, SB 310, that took us 3 years to get done. So in California, if you had a felony conviction, no matter how old it was, no matter when it occurred, no matter what it was for, no matter if it was dismissed or not, reduced to a misdemeanor, any felony conviction barred you from serving as a jury. You could have that weed sale from 25 years ago, no other cases, and you could not serve as a juror. That law excluded over 30% of Black men from serving as jurors in California. So we weren't that great. Okay, I'm going back to California. We didn't lead. Okay, we got that law passed. Okay, it took us 3 years, but we got that done. That was defender-led. This year, we got a bill passed called AB 3070 by Weber down there. Awesome, huge ally, to change the Batson-Wheeler process, because we know right now the way Batson is set up, it is set up to keep Black people from serving as jurors. It is. Excuses like, you don't trust law enforcement. DAs use them, kick them off. You support Black Lives Matter, you're kicked off. You've had people in your family been arrested by police, you get kicked off. You visited jail, you get kicked off. You receive state benefits, you get kicked off. Our law, AB 3070, has made those excuses presumptively invalid. Prosecutors cannot use those excuses to kick off jurors anymore. And that's defender-led. Okay, so that's what we have to be proactive about. When I think about states that have led, I just came to mind when you said that, Vermont. Vermont has led. You know why? There ain't no damn Black people there, okay? That's why they've led. Can felons serve as jurors? Hell yeah. Can felons yell? Hell yeah. Okay. Vermont. So we get back to the system. We get back to systemic racism. That's one of the glaring examples right there.
Well, we were pretty excited before the pandemic hit New York City, because we had finally gotten bail reform. We had made some inroads into discovery, and finally defense attorneys were going to have the opportunity to see what the prosecutor sees from the beginning to end. Well, just like the 2020 presidential election and Stacey Abrams' victory in Georgia, our discovery and bail reform was short-lived in New York. You know, shortly after they said that our bill would be effective, the drumbeat started in various quarters to try to roll back the advances that New York had just enacted. Joey, can you speak to that? And tell me how that's affected your view on the so-called progress that New York claims to be making.
So I think there's a couple of things to address. So the first thing, obviously, is that, I think the legislature wanted to be progressive on the issue of bail, and they wanted to enact and introduce legislation that would allow people to, really be let out and not have to go into a system. We shouldn't have an issue in a system that is designed to otherwise favor people who are privileged, to favor people who have money, and to favor people who generally are resourced enough to pay the bail and then leave. To the earlier point that was raised by Ms. Perkins, look, the reality is many people have, as a result of not having the resources, pled guilty and done other things. And so without getting far afield or launching too much into it, the legislature had a great idea of let's have a situation where we eliminate that process. and that we make certain offenses such that, it's presumptive that bail will not be imposed. And that led to a situation and a process where a lot more people were being released, taking a lot more discretion out of judges' hands. And obviously, there are some crimes that you're going to set bail for and don't qualify, but other crimes where, at the end of the day, you should be released, right? Lessen the jail population, did a number of things. But then to your issue, Leslie, there was this pushback, and the pushback was, hey, wait a second, right? Too many people are being let out. The streets are being overrun. It's not in keeping with what we really intended, the law of unintended consequences. And so you have, a rollback and a pushback in, hey, let's look at the reform, let's analyze that reform, and let's see if that reform is in keeping with what really should be taking place in our state. And so at the end of the day, I think it's about finding a happy medium in our criminal justice system that, number one, recognizes the need to have people who are in a system that is not overly punitive towards them, us people of color, to have a system that recognizes that people who are not resourced and who are appearing before the court should be released with a date to return, particularly if they're not violent, to have a system which equalizes so that people of color are not disproportionately impacted and caged and thrown in jail for no reason, but you have to find a balance to that. And so I think that was the pushback, right? The pushback was, hey, did we go too far? You had a number of people screaming that maybe we did, maybe the state did go too far. Maybe the legislature overreacted, maybe it didn't. We could have debates all night and all day on the nuances of that, whether or not, the legislation ultimately struck the right chord. I can tell you from representing corrections that, yes, there is less of a jail population now. However, there are parties that are in jail who are much more violent based upon the nature of who's being arrested, based upon the felonies, et cetera. But, at the end of the day, I'll just say this. We have to match, I think, laws that are progressively designed not to disproportionately impair and impact our people of color. We have to design laws that are not punitive on people of color. We have to design laws that are not really catering to people who are privileged, but to recognize and understand that all people who come before the court should be treated with courtesy, treated with fairness, treated with respect, treated with dignity, and ultimately allowed to defend and to move forward. And so, yes, we can argue that there was pushback, and it depends upon your point of view, Leslie. On the one hand, you could argue that the bail package as initially proposed did the right thing and should have been left alone. You could argue that the discovery laws with regard to giving us lawyers the tools we need to move forward in a good way to represent our clients was a great move. And we can argue that maybe it went too far, maybe it didn't go far enough. And that's a function of where we sit, that's a function of our political ideology. But no matter where you stand on it, I just, because I'm an optimistic guy, I just think that, change is incremental. I think progress, ultimately, while slow in coming, we have to continue to push for. I think we have to continue to push for progressive reforms that are going to have a system that is designed to be fair. And we know that there's not always fairness, but I'll just take it and I won't speak too much longer. A lot of people have things to say, but, I think I come back to the point I made earlier. It's not only about legislation as it relates to bail, not only about legislation as it relates to discovery. It's not only about what the legislature does or does not do. It's what people who are in positions of power and authority do and how they use their discretion. How does a judge use their discretion in order to put a person in or put a person out? How does a judge use their discretion in order to admit evidence or exclude evidence? How is an officer, who are the officers manning the streets? Are they familiar with those communities? Are they trained properly? Do they do they live in those communities? Do they have an understanding of those communities? Are they arresting people properly in those communities? And at the end of the day, what is a prosecutor doing with that case? And who's defending the case? And how adequate, proper, and appropriate of representation is everyone having? And so just to conclude, what I have to say is that you know, the system is a big system, and it can't be blamed on the legislature exclusively. It can't be blamed on the judge exclusively. It can't be blamed on the police exclusively. It can't be blamed on the prosecutor, and we can't make claims of, oh, ineffective assistance of counsel. I think everybody has a role to play to improve, to develop, to advance our system. And I think with having discussions like this with so many people who are as talented as the people tonight, I think that's how we get advances in our system. We expose what the issues are, we discuss how to resolve the issues, and then we actually execute the plan to make life better.
Jameis, you brought up a case that reached national prominence in terms of the shock value to the sensibilities of people of color across the country. My question, I mean, the discussion is about police reform and the problem of over-policing. You know, I want to see during the course of your travels what you think about the push, body cams, police oversight. Can the police basically police themselves?
I don't think so. I really don't. The blue line is real. It's real. There was a special on BET, I think it was last night, talking about the Chicago Police Department. Out of the entire Chicago Police Department, there was only one officer, black young man, only been on the force for 2 years, that refused to join the FOP. The FOP president, white man, clearly appears to have racist motives, racist motivations, white supremacist attitudes and behaviors. And the Chicago Police Department, that has a large number of Black officers, still refuse to do something as simple as, I'm not going to be a member of the FOP. So when you think about it, they just don't have the ability to police themselves. There are cases, I had a young man call me, I think it was just a couple of days ago, but Black young man dressed in a business suit, going to a car dealership where he works. Well, as he's on his way there, decided to go to Starbucks, and he saw the line was too long, does a U-turn, turns back and goes to his dealership. When he turns in, he's surrounded by police officers. They jump out, weapons drawn, pointed down on him. They're yelling, cursing, threatening his life, telling him they've got their finger on the trigger, just give me a reason to pull it. They're telling him to, get out of the car, which he's refusing to do because he's terrified, hands are up. They snatch him out, they handcuff him. People in the dealership are running out to say, hey, they're yelling at them to get back. They're asking this guy, hey, what are you doing? Whose car is this? He says, it's my car. He has a suit on. My car, where'd you get it from? I bought it. How do you afford this car? Well, come to find out, this guy's only 24. He's the number one salesman at this Dodge dealership. Makes 6 figures, this kid does. So he calls me, of course, he's completely, he's upset. He wants something to be done. The officers, they release him, they run the plate. They go, oh, well, there's been a high number of carjackings in our area. So yesterday there was a car that looked somewhat like this one. It didn't have a plate on it or anything, but this one looks somewhat similar. So this is our reason for doing what we've done. He goes to the police department to file a complaint. They send down to him the officer who was the main one who had the gun drawn on him. That's the person they sent to take the report. That officer told him, hey, you know what, Mr. So-and-so, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It really shouldn't have. That was the narcotics unit. Those guys gave us bad information and guys are getting in trouble for that. So the guy asked him, he says, well, did you have your body cam on? The officer says, no, I didn't. Don't worry, I didn't turn mine on. Well, unbeknownst to the officer, well, he probably knows, but doesn't think this young man's going to follow up. But this is a car dealership. There are cameras everywhere. So yes, we have discovery. Yes, there are things that are available to us that we can do to expose this. But can the police police themselves? In my opinion, no way. They can't do it.
Lachala?
Okay, I gotta see, these men get on my nerves. Brendan, are you from New York?
He's from Queens,
Okay,
Jamaica.
fighting games up between Anthony, Joey, and Brendan. And I'm the only one really here from California, but that's besides the point, but I had to bring that up. On April 22nd, we're going to be addressing that issue. And this is our section. I don't know if you saw the one, prosecutors. I'll get it up on the NBA website. And once I get information off the membership, but with our Black police officers, there's a saying, they're too Black to be blue, too blue to be Black. So there is a problem. And a Thin Blue, John Burris wrote a book about it. They cannot police themselves. And the biggest problem is the unions. The unions are very powerful. And that's is really what stopped me, because I don't think any chief of police, or whatever you want to call it, the head of top, wants a bad police officer. It affects the whole department. And then what happens is they mess up, and then you got settlements, and the taxpayers end up paying for it. And so it's hard to police yourselves. In fact, attorneys cannot even police themselves. And it was funny because I was actually legal advisor to the San Diego Black Police Officers Association, which I thought was just hilarious. A defense attorney work with the police department, but I don't have any fear of them. But you know what? I don't want them to stop me. And I already put it on record. I make sure I have a full tank. They try to stop me. I got the Knott defense because that one girl was killed, Kara Knott. I'm not stopping. And I will drive all the way to the state line, like, what was his name? O.J. Simpson. I'm not going to violate any laws, but I'm not stopping. But there is a problem with the community, and it still has not changed. And they've done studies, and there was a couple of articles out the other day how they treat. So I know some are trying to do de-escalation, but when you realize the way the police department came into existence was slave patrols. And they were scared we were going to do what they did to us. And that's how they came. And the mindset hasn't changed. And like one police lieutenant told me, we have to, get people from the human race. And they've done those studies. What is it called? The implicit attitude test. I know it's IAT. And there's a difference, because when they see someone white who looks like them, then they don't have any fear. Like your son, I mean, how did that guy kill those 9 people down? I think it was South Carolina. And they knew he killed 9 people, and he got a burger. But our people can't have a cell phone. You can't do anything. And they have this fear. They look at us that we're bigger, we're more threatening, and it doesn't matter. And I don't know how it's going to change, because it's too, systemic, and it's ingrained. I don't know how to change it, but all I know is I'm not stopping for the police. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Mr. Rico, can the police themselves? Can they perform oversight over their misconduct? Your thought?
No. And there's nothing about the history of policing and the history of this country that would give you any indication that the answer to that question is anything other than no. As a criminal defense lawyer, I've represented people who have murdered cops, and I've represented cops who have murdered people in our community. And I could tell you that when you represent a police officer who's murdered an African American, every door in the system opens to them. Every motion that you lost in your other cases are granted. And there's an unlimited supply of resources to assist them. Now, do I have a problem with that? No. I have a problem with the fact that those unlimited resources are not available for everyone. Now, my take on some of this is really consistent with everybody else's. All of this started in an 1857 case called Scott versus Sanford, when Roger Brooke Taney wrote in support of the Fugitive Slaves Act's enforcement that blacks had no rights by which any white man was bound to respect. And whether you want to call it police reform, bail reform, discovery reform, we need to eliminate racism and bigotry from the criminal justice system, wherever it exists. You don't need bail reform when you don't have, if you have people on the bench who don't exercise their discretion based upon their overt and implicit biases. We have enough laws on the books. You don't need discovery laws when prosecutors is not hiding stuff. The number of exonerations that are taking place in our country today is unprecedented. Ken Thompson's office, God rest his soul, now run by Eric Gonzalez, 26 exonerations in 18 months. And those are the cases where there was 3 votes to do it. There were other cases where there were 2, but they couldn't get the 3rd vote. You know, Brendan talked about a very important bill in California. That bill was passed in Washington State 2 years ago. It's the criminal defense bar here, and Leslie, you're aware of this. We submitted proposals to Letitia James, Darcel Clark, Eric Gonzalez, the Queens District Attorney, the politician that I don't know. We're still waiting for a response back. We submitted a proposed bill, a memorandum of law on what laws in the state of New York have to be amended in order for it to become effective. Examples of where it has been passed: Washington, Connecticut, and California. These are African American people in positions of authority who have not responded to a request for us to confront one of the most fundamental injustices in our criminal justice system, which is bias and racism in jury selection. Now let's just take a second, because we're students of the law. We've read Foster versus Chapman. We've read Mississippi versus Flowers, Flowers versus Mississippi. We've read Pena Rodriguez versus Colorado. And in those opinions, the conservative judges put on the bench have said race is the poison that's destroying the public's confidence in the judiciary. Now, that's not a quote by Brendan Woods, and that's not a quote by Janice Perkins. That's a quote by Roberts and Alito. They know exactly what's going on. It is up to us to litigate these issues. Ain't nobody going to do it because they got elected to some office. When they get elected to one of them offices, their big job and responsibility is to get reelected to the office. And they are not going to take on these issues. I wasn't shocked nor surprised that these people ignored the hard work that members of the defense bar went into drafting the bill, because the legislature won't do it on its own, and we don't have a single politician in Albany who has the capability of drafting one of these bills on their own. And they just ignored it. So I get it. You know, all the talk sound good. I'm the first Black DA, and I'm the first this, and I'm the first that. I'm with Brendan. If this was 1930 and you talking about you was the first, hey, you know, good. Go pick up your Oscar talking about I'd rather play a maid than be a maid. But we're in the 21st century now. And when you're talking about being first in the 21st century, you're talking about a real-time look at why is that so. And it is meaningless to be first if there's no second, third, or fourth. You are not first. You're called the only. And the question becomes, why is that so? So I'm not like, you know, believe it or not, and for the people who know me, don't know me, whatever, I'm not no soapbox person. By the way, when y'all saw me, I don't know if y'all noticed, I kind of jumped out the car for a second. I still live uptown. I live about 4 blocks from where I grew up. I made it very far in life. And I'm coming back uptown because we had a funeral gathering for a sister who died from COVID, leaving her children behind. I'm driving up Manhattan Avenue and the lights are glaring. There are 4 police cars surrounding people grieving. Every cop blacker than me, half my age, intimidating, please get that, intimidating and harassing people in this community grieving. This is the responsibility of African-American lawyers. You know, when I worked with the great Judge Wright said to me, he said, Tony, it's the obligation and responsibility of African-American lawyers to see to it that Black Americans get the same treatment in these courts, no more, no less than anyone else. But in doing that, you are revolutionizing the system. Because the system is designed for injustice. Let somebody tell you that that's not true. It's a pipe dream. So we could talk about defunding police, lack of training. Look, a cop don't need to be trained not to shoot a boy in the back, right? Defund the police. The money didn't kill Floyd. These are all deflections that take us away from the serious efforts to take this system on. And we, the defense bar, are the champions of that. It's an awesome responsibility. I'm not a preacher. I'm not. I'm not into preaching. I'm not even into trying to get people to think any way other than they feel like thinking. But I do know a little something about criminal defense work because it is something that I've done now almost 40 years. For people who know me, every day of the week, people who know me, they get emails from me, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm up. And I'm doing my thing. And people are saying, well, Tony, why are you motivated that way? 2 very simple reasons. People paid a very heavy price for us to have the privilege of being called counselor. Our responsibility is to honor that sacrifice with commitment. You know, we can find ourselves to be committed to a whole lot of other things, our own personal achievements and goals, and meaningless. People have done all of this before us. But it's the folks that have championed our rights in these courtrooms that has made it possible for all of us to be where we are today. And if we are not championing those causes, not taking advantage of the benefits, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're not championing the causes, then you're leaving the responsibility of that to others. And who might those be? Who might those be? If we're disconnected from our own community, if we're scared of our own youth, if when we become successes, we don't live no longer in our communities, where does the next Miss Wilson come from? Where does the next Miss Perkins come from? Where does the next Joey Jackson come from? Where's the next Brendan Woods come from? It is our responsibility to do that. So folks see me, I walk into the courtroom, bow tie on, suit, tie, boom. Not hat on backwards, yo, what's up? How you? No. We're here to practice law. And we're here to make a statement. You know, I'm okay with judges say, oh, Mr. Rico, what do you have today? Judge once said to me, you want to make an argument at the end of the day. And the judge, I said, Judge, there's something I want to put on the record. And the judge says, I was afraid you were going to say that. So I looked at the judge and I said, you know, that's an interesting use of words. I don't understand why you would be afraid that I wanted to make a record when it's my job and responsibility to do that. I understood what the judge meant. But you pick your fights. You pick the situations. So the question, I know I deviated from the question, maybe, is can the police themselves? No. And check this out. Ain't nobody in this country really believe that that's true, right? Now, they could sucker you into having a dialogue about it, a debate about it. I mean, you can spend hours talking about it, but don't get confused with chatter, with real change and what people really have on their minds. Because there's not a single person in this country who believes that. Ms. Wilson was right about them unions. Saw how strong them unions come out when a Colin Kaepernick, a football player, right, gets on a knee for like 5 seconds while folks is making billions of dollars off of Negro talent. And the police unions are outraged. I think the president said, get those sons of bitches off the field. Those folks stormed the Capitol and killed a police officer. Not one police union in this country issued a statement, let alone held a press conference about it. And so, yeah, they engage us in these circular conversations when we're standing up not to be shot in the back. It's just a deflection. Our focus is on the elimination of racism in jury selection, how jurors perceive you as an advocate in that courtroom, how they perceive witnesses. Are Black witnesses believed less? Picking a jury, doing a voir dire. White lady raises her hand at Judge Richard Lowe. Myself, Ed Woolford, on trial. Supreme Court, defendants are sitting next to us. White lady raised her hand. You're up doing voir dire. Said, Judge, how come these defendants don't have lawyers? Why are they representing themselves?
Wow.
For the record. And so this is what we're confronted with. And every lawyer on this platform here has a similar story. I know they do. And I'm gonna tell you this, if you don't, you're doing something wrong. So I like to think, I watched the show I watched the panel discussion when the prosecutors were on. I thought it was real interesting. I used to run track. I know what it's like to take a victory lap. I'm this, I'm the first, that, you taking a victory lap to an empty stadium. Because the real work is, people tell you, look how far we come. Okay, yeah, let's look how far we come. How many innocent Black men and women have been murdered in the streets in the last 3 years? We talking about how far we come. We're not talking about the criminal justice system. Now, you might be talking about basketball MVP trophies and Oscar and things like that. Oh, yeah, we got a whole lot of those. But we got too many exonerations. And we all know what exonerations mean. Exonerations mean people who were innocent, not people who were released because of technicality. And what's the strain that goes through all of these exonerations for people that 25, 30, 40, one brother in Detroit, 47 years in the penitentiary? What's the commonality that goes through these cases? They were all Black teenagers on trial. They were all convicted by mostly white jurors. They were all represented by mostly, but not totally, white lawyers. They were all prosecuted by white prosecutors. And they were all convicted for crimes they did not commit. And these are the ones that we let out. And so we, as criminal defense lawyers, hey, if what has happened to us in this country and continues to happen to us in this country doesn't motivate you to get involved in criminal defense work, fine, do something else. But you can't do this work and expect to be effective or expect to be respected unless you understand the bigger dynamic of what we do. So no, police cannot, and they know they can't, monitor themselves. No one can monitor themselves. That's not monitoring. Sorry for rambling on.
Brendan, your thoughts on police oversight? I mean, California is the reason I decided not to take the bar there. When they started talking 3 strikes, I'm like, you know, I can just see you all need a lot of shovels just to protect people's rights.
So I mean, the answer, it's already been answered. I almost don't even want to go after
Tony.
Because there's great stuff. Can police themselves? Like, hell no. I mean, it's almost not even a question. That's been established. And I guess what can we do to make things better? We talk about defunding. That's one strategy, but it gets to the heart of policing. How can policing be better? There's got to be more controls. The union is probably the biggest issue, and the money behind it, and the politicians and how they listen to the money. Okay, that's just a huge issue. And then when I think about laws and money, the liability, civil liability, big issue. The qualified immunity, big issue. If you begin to hit these departments themselves with the lawsuits, not the county or city, you might get some change. Okay, if that department's going to lose $10 million themselves, you might get some change. We have to put in place a decertification process. We have these cops who commit bad act in one city, then go get a job in the next city over, the next city over, the next city over. They keep committing the same harm in different locations to our community. And there's got to be, I think personally, in every city with a police department, there's got to be a civilian review board with power and teeth and the ability to fire police officers. We can't rely on the police to police themselves. It's got to be community policing the police. That's the only way we're going to get any sort of change. So that's my quick answer to that.
So, what do you all have to say to young law students, 2nd, 3rd, 4th career people in other specialties who are interested in becoming a part of the criminal justice system to become a criminal defense attorney? Jamise?
I tell them that it's one of the most rewarding things that you could ever do. I really would. I would encourage them, and there's so much to be done. We've only touched the tip of the iceberg. There are things that, like, we talk about the collateral consequences of felony convictions. There are, for example, in Indiana, there is no real expungement. You can get a sealing of some records, but the law is written in such a way that even that information can still be disclosed. And depending on the type of conviction it is, they have the nerve to still put it in the online public docket, expunged. So the whole world knows that there was something that was there. That's almost worse, because the person could have just had, it might have been an OWI or something, something, a public intox. I mean, it could have been something that wasn't as egregious, but you have this flag on you that says expunged. So there's just so much work you can do. And to me, it's one of the most rewarding things. And I guess if you have a passion for it, then of course, I think you'll be drawn to it. We've heard that story from a number of the panelists here today. And I think someone said, I didn't choose criminal defense, it chose me. I think that was Attorney Rico. And so I would encourage them, and I would encourage them to learn from as many people as you can. Much like you, Leslie, when I went to the prosecutor's office, my number one goal was becoming the best trial attorney I could become. I want to learn everything, and it's birth by fire. You just get in there. They're going to throw you out there and throw you some cases, and and I was able to, I think within a year, I probably first chaired a murder case. Like, okay, great, yeah, you got to figure this out. But watch as many skilled attorneys as you can, watch and learn. Ask questions, talk to people, shadow somebody, ask them, can I follow you? Can I carry your briefcase to court? Can I sit and watch it? It doesn't matter. And that's what I still do it now. I see somebody, I'm like, I go and sit down in the courtroom and watch a trial. I just sit there and I say, man, that was a great thing they just did there. That was awesome. Next time I'm in court, I'm in the closing argument, I'm sitting in the witness chair, you know, or whatever it is that I'm picking up, those bits and pieces. So I definitely would tell them that I don't think there's anything more rewarding that someone can do. You know, having been as a prosecutor and saying to my boss, I refuse to prosecute this murder case. I don't believe in this case. I won't do it. And we don't have people of color in that position. We just don't. But we need them there as well to say, this is not a good case. It's not right. We're not going to do it. This kid just went in someone's house and stole an Xbox. I'm not going to make him a felon. But likewise, sitting there with a client that you know is innocent and that's facing, you know, 120 years in prison or life or the death penalty, you know, I mean, there are no greater stakes. There really are not. So there's a lot of work that's here to be done, and I think it's rewarding. I'd encourage them.
I think the thing that was most exciting for me was listening to Joey and his background and Tony and his background and Brendan, because people have certain perceptions of you when they see you dressed up in court, standing tall, writing well. They just assume, and even our clients in the community, they assume, oh, you went to this great school. We have no frame of reference. You have no context or affinity that we can share so that you can do my case. But, you know, all of us are first generation college, first generation law school, first out of the neighborhood, first back into the neighborhood. And what really resonates with me is what you all talked about in terms of commitment. There are many times when I'm grousing to Tony about, if I could do anything, I would just practice criminal law. But I have to pay my bills. I have to send my kids to college. I have to pay my mortgage. And for some reason, my criminal clients have dragged me into divorce and family court, which is a crime in and of itself. So, you know, commitment is the watchword, diligence and attentiveness to the issues, not the distractions, is what's critical. I did think Tony Rico was going Hollywood when he became president of the New York Criminal Bar Association, right, Joey? I was like, wow, you know, this death penalty stuff, it's really high profile. But I have to say, it did cause a lot of Black, Hispanic, and Asian attorneys to join the New York Criminal Bar Association just because he became president. Because before we were just like, why should we be a part of this organization? Evidently, our participants and our registrants have been so entranced and hypnotized by the tidbits of knowledge you all have been dispensing that I'm not getting any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm getting accolades from your fellow viewers. So, I mean, I thought it was really important. We started this series because we were listening to what was going on with Black Lives Matter. All of these non-lawyers were speaking for the criminal justice field. And I felt it was critical for some of the Black and Hispanic prosecutors on Facebook and across the country who were really feeling isolated and like they were on the wrong side of the equation, that we give them a voice. And this panel is about giving criminal defense attorneys a voice, because but for Tony Rico, Joey Jackson, Brendan, I gave up doing TV. You know, I just get tired of, you know, not getting paid to do TV, you know, but, you know, it is critical for criminal defense attorneys to have a voice and not let non-lawyers speak to what is ailing the criminal justice system, what needs to be done to correct it, and what movements have to continue. So
Someone, I see something in the chat. I'm sorry for somebody said many of us are also still being called stupid by our law schools, even to this day. So my response was, the next time somebody calls you stupid, punch them in their mouth. And they won't be calling you stupid no more.
Can I make a comment?
If I may, and if I was to punctuate that into, other than being cute, what we're doing, what all of these lawyers do, is that we're punching the system in the mouth. We are holding the system accountable. And that's what we're doing. And when I see like some of the younger lawyers in New York, Joey, Lance, Kenny Montgomery, Natalie Todd, there are many others. They're really taking this whole thing to another level. And that is really, that to me is the sign of progress for us in terms of criminal defense law. When I mean taking it to the next level, they're taking it away from, the lone gunman, the lone wolf, the person that's out there, them and their boys, Tony and Ed from Hall, that kind of thing, but really organizing into a force to be reckoned with. And, for me, it's a proud thing to see. And, we're talking more, and not really to exclude, people, I know a lot about California, but I'm not a regular there. I'm out there a few times a year, but I know that there are people in California doing the same thing. And there are people in Indiana and there's Chicago and in Miami and other places around this country. We don't, just because, nobody's inviting you to, some syndicated show, that doesn't mean that people are not in the trenches doing this work, because it's true. There are a lot of outstanding African-American and Latino lawyers in this country who day in and day out are putting in work. And so for the students that are here, that are in school, and people are posting stuff about how professors are denigrating people in school, look, call my office up, call Joey Jackson, call Miss Wilson, call Brendan Woods. They do it because they think you isolated and they think you're afraid. And they treat us that way at the bar. When people recognize that you have some courage and you have skills, you're able to take them to the appellate division. They won't do it again. I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson.
Oh, it's fine. And the only thing I wanted to add is maybe the thing I liked about being a defense attorney, no matter what crime my client was alleged to have committed, I was able to find some good at them. And that's knowing you do like the statement of mitigation. I don't care. And sometimes it was very trying because some of the stuff, and when they do those probation reports, it's like, how do I find something? So I decided that each day I wanted to go to work and find something good in a person instead of pointing the finger saying you're bad or bad. And then just digress and then like community pride. I remember walking down the hallway one time and this Black lady came to me, she goes, "Are you an attorney?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I've never seen a Black attorney." And I didn't realize that because I was only the second one that was doing felonies. And of course, I'm not going to get into the judge saying you're the probation officer. And I'm like, because I'm not the probation officer, turning all red. And I guess they must have made a phone call, say, "Hey, there's a Black lady doing felonies now." But the other part, and this is going to sound weird, but it's not. When you look at it, I don't know what your religious affiliations, but Jesus Christ, someone did a sermon on that, was actually a public defender. He died for us and he represented us. And so you can't complain about that, but I do tell people that's why I don't worry about whether someone committed a crime or not. If I knew, I would be a witness and I wouldn't be able to represent them. But I know when you go up there, there's another judge, you'll be sitting right hand, so he's not going to be your defense attorney anymore. And, you know, you're just more in control as a defense attorney because you don't have to ask for permission. And doing trials, that was the only time I really felt safe. It's like doing the readiness, doing a preliminary hearing. But once I get in trial, I'm in charge. Judge, you know, you just sit up there and call balls and strikes. I'm in control now. And that's what I like. The only thing that worries me, though, I always wonder, did anyone I represent, you know, will later on be exonerated? And, you know, it's been like 7 years, so I don't think so. But I do remember clients pleading guilty. And I'm like, wait, this is a perfect defense of others. And I told the DA that. So, of course, they made it a non-strike, credit for time served. And the guy goes, I know, Miss Wills, they can win. They go, but I got to get out because I need to go to work. And I was like, don't plead to something you can do, but you know, there's nothing I can do about it. So I've had a few of those too. But talking to you guys, I feel so good. I feel powerful. And it's just like sometimes you go to seminars like California Public Defender Association, and when you get out, it's like, hey, I can stand tall. I can, you know, beat everybody now. And so that's good. Why it's good to fellowship and take classes or seminars with other like-minded people. And I'm gonna get on your case about something, but I forgot to write it down. But only thing I want to say, what's important is, you know, we already did the prosecutor one, and then we're going to do law enforcement on April 22nd and military in May, you know, because how they're also impacted is Black faces in legal spaces. And then in June, we're going to do something on Brady, because that has to do with the exonerations that we're seeing and the failure of prosecutors to turn over the discovery. So right now might just be, as I've done before, 50 Shades of Brady. I'll come up with something sort of catchy, or Brady and the Bunch, but we will cover that before we have our annual meeting in July. All right, that's it.
Yeah. We also talked about probably digging in really deep in this section on cases like the Fort Hood case. And one of our committee members, Jeremy Broussard, the rest of you know Jamie Boston, because he's, you know, top draw attorney. His sister is the first Black female leader of New York City Bar. But these cases in the military, the system of justice and the system of injustice, the roles of prosecution and defense in military law. We were talking to Jeremy about it yesterday, and he was talking about the fact that in military law, you can serve on both sides of the fence when you're in private practice. And he was indicating to me and LaShala and Terry that he has hardly ever come up against a defense attorney in military law who's of color. And it's not just Black, of color. So we're probably going to be doing, not only looking at some of the injustices perpetuated by what seems like numerous murders in Texas on this military base, which, you know, I'm sure if one white person got murdered on that military base, it would be a full-blown inquiry. But maybe about 10 Hispanic people and Black people have to get killed in order for the command to be relieved, but nothing to happen. These are the types of issues that we want to start digging into and discussing, and basically talking to our colleagues across the jurisdictions, South, West, East, and putting our heads together so that we can collaborate and continue to roll out the change. Just want to let you all know, thank you very much for your time. I know it's very difficult for attorneys and interested people to take any measure of time, whether it be 15 minutes or an hour. I know you all have Zoom fatigue and COVID fatigue, but I have to tell you that I'm energized every time I get to speak to advocates of your caliber. It definitely inspires me. It makes me realize that I made the right decision and I'm breathing oxygen every day. Terry?
Yes. So hello, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for participating. The panel was absolutely outstanding. I mean, you can, the one thing you can appreciate, I know myself as a prosecutor, is just hearing just years of experience coming from that panel. I mean, the quality of the comments is a result of years and years of experience as defense attorneys. And I just really enjoyed the whole conversation. So I really want to thank the panelists for participating in this just great discussion. I also just want to add that on April 9th and April 10th, the NBA is having its mid-year conference, and we do have 2 criminal law panels. One panel is going to be a panel of prosecutors, top prosecutors from across the country, talking about some of the value they bring to this whole discussion. And there's going to be another panel that is going to consist of 3 of the top civil rights lawyers in the country, including Lanita Baker, who represented the Breonna Taylor, the family of Breonna Taylor, and some others, and 2 police chiefs, and where there'll be a very robust discussion on some of how the civil rights attorneys come into these cases and have to deal with these issues, and how the police departments are in many cases asked to police themselves. That's going to be a big part of the discussion. And what are some of the changes that everyone sees in light of the George Floyd case? So it should be a very, very interesting discussion, seeing the civil rights attorneys mix it up with the police chiefs. So we hope everyone can attend. And Leslie, I just want to say you did a great job as moderating this as the moderator of this panel, and a great job landing some of the best talent out of New York, and Lechala and Brendan, fantastic. I told Jamise before we went on that, a lot of times we tend to forget about that huge criminal justice system in Chicago. And Jamise, fantastic job. Really loved hearing your comments. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Wait, Terry, before you leave, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Were you so impressed that you're going to become a defense attorney next and be like us?
Well, okay. Jamise.
He just got promoted.
Jamise said that one of the reasons she left the prosecutor's office in part was because of pay. But, out in California, the pay is pretty good, and I'm 1 year away from retirement, so I'm not going anywhere.
I was just asking, that's all. I was asking for a friend. I didn't really want to know.
No. He's probably gonna retire to be a criminal defense attorney,
Yeah, we could be W. Wilson and Wiley, or Wiley and Wilson. It doesn't matter.
Well, I want to thanks for inviting me. When I'm on the West Coast, I attend the California Public Defense Conference every year. So I'm going to look for Ms. Wilson, and I'm going to look for Brendan, and Jamise. I'm going to find you out in the Midwest.
Come on down.
Yeah, I'm going to find you. And Joey, brother, thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
You're an inspiration. Your reputation precedes you, and if I could do 10% of what you've accomplished, I'd be doing really well.
We're all doing it together. We're all doing it together, and all of us are very proud of what we see. When I turn on CNN, and your analysis is spot on, legally.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
You're not an empty wagon, and it's just fantastic.
Thank you.
And
I do want to add that, Joey, I do have to say that, as an attorney, I feel really proud when I see you up there handling it on CNN. And it's like Tony said, your analysis is spot on every single time. So I don't know if you got law clerks doing your research before you go on, but you get it done, brother.
No, Terry, I just have titans like you that I examine and look at, and I say, if I do what he did, then I'm okay. So thank you very much.
Another thing we're going to be doing in line with what Tony's talking about in terms of traversing the country and becoming aware of this small club of advocates that exists. LaChala has proposed us doing a digital newsletter. And, you know, irrespective of the participation, these are the seeds of what we want to germinate, because we don't want to just sit in our own regions and do what we do. We want everyone to become aware of who Joey Jackson is, who Bernarda Villalona is, who just joined Joey's firm, who I've known for years, Brendan, Jamise, Larry Taylor. We're going to actually start spotlighting not only our attorneys, but our attorneys who work in teams, and also our Black law firms. Because for some reason, people of color, of whether they're white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, they really think there are no Black firms. You know, even now, at the age of 61, people still walk up to me and ask me if I passed the bar, which I find fascinating. I never see them asking white people of any age if they pass the bar, but you know, it's fascinating. But we're going to stay connected, because in this world where we have so many devices and, you know, access, all of us have actually become even more disconnected. You know, because of the white noise, the Wi-Fi, and all of our myriad of responsibilities. So that's what's in the hopper in terms of what we want to do so that we all stay connected. And we just hope you all tell your friends that the NBA Crim Law Juvenile Justice section, we're here to stay.
Right.
Right.
Amen. God bless you all.
All right. Great
Likewise.
job, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys for your participation.
Thank
Of
you.
course. Thank you.